You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, huge shout out to our sponsors. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. Adding to that is the Doghouse, and so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We're down at the Bedford studio at Bedford's Camera today, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest, Mr. Kevin, and it's Emily Barclay. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
I'm glad your car's fixed. I'm glad we made this happen.
That's right.
We've shout out to Lance McDaniel for sending me your number, and I had lunch with him, and he's like, I always ask him, who do you know that I haven't interviewed yet? And he's like, oh, you need to text Emily right now. So shout out to Lance. I'm sure he's listening somewhere.
Lance is all amazing. Degrees of Lance McDaniel.
If he's not socializing, he's listening. But yeah, super pumped to hear your story. And also, Jason Gallagher is coming in right after this to do a Thunder preview pod. And it's funny that you're here because he texted me one day, why is Robert Downey Jr. at Sourced on Paseo? And I was like, I don't know, let me do some digging and I'll find out. And then like 6 months later, I had lunch with Lance. He mentioned you, and I was like, and mentioned the Downies. And I text Jason straight. I was like, I know why. And he's like, I've already met Emily. We're friends.
True story. Robert said, "This is the best house salad I've ever had in my life."
He loved it.
Salad.
The house salad sauced.
Okay,
just throwing that out there.
He was very impressed with their salad.
He loved the house salad.
That is amazing.
That's funny. I feel like it didn't seem that crowded that night at Sauced, and yet I got several texts from people that, for whatever reason, knew that he was there. Very bizarre.
Also took him through Plaza Walls, and I think he thought that was really cool.
That is a really cool place. Just had Dusty Gilpin on the podcast, who is in the mural world and has the old gas station in the plaza now. And Carlos Barboza have that space. Both awesome people. But the good thing about Oklahoma is we literally know everybody. 1 degree of separation everywhere. And so I'm excited to dive into your story and find out how you connect and how this all gets you. But going way back, let's set some context. Where were you both born and raised, and how do you get, what is like your childhoods and to get you into the love of the things that you do?
Sure. So I grew up here. It's funny, actually, driving up here, we passed my mom's middle school and high school, Taft and Northwest Classen. My dad went to Harding, so old school. I think I'm fourth generation. My great-grandpa came to Oklahoma in a covered wagon and was a participant of a land run, which is, complicated history, but it's bizarre when I think that my great-grandfather was alive during the Civil War, like a baby, but like that recent history. So yes, long-time Oklahoma family, but I grew up North Edmond, Deer Creek area, and then went to high school at Heritage Hall, where I met Lance McDaniel. And then I left to go to USC when I was in college, or when I graduated. So 1991, which was, a difficult time here in Oklahoma, living through the oil bust in the 80s and the Depression. The economy here was, kind of in the toilet. So a lot of people, unfortunately, I think our intellectual equity or whatever, a lot of students left the state at that. Not everyone, obviously. I have good friends who buckled down and stayed, but it was tough times. So left for 31 years, lived in Los Angeles and had a film career there. And then Kevin and I met, and he had lived in Austin, Texas for quite a while. And ultimately, we lived in LA together for about 8-10 years. And then we were visiting during COVID, and Kevin really just fell in love with Oklahoma City. So we decided to make the move back, which was never in the cards for me. But we can talk more about that. Do you want to talk about how you...
Yeah, my story is a little different. I grew up in Northern California, tiny town of 500 people, which my family was like, my mom was born in the town, my grandmother was born in the town before that. So similar to Emily, but in a California sense, we went back to the gold rush era and grew up there, discovered a video camera when I was a kid, and I'm dating myself, but it was the 80s, and my aunt and uncle got a VHS camcorder, and once my friends and I got our hands on it, there was no turning back. We were obsessed, and we made skits and videos, and by high school it had become a real passion. And thankfully I was able to, we didn't have classes at any of the schools in our area for video or film, but there was a retired German documentary filmmaker in my community that had started a public access studio. My mom linked me up with him. His name is Paul Moeller, and he took me on as an apprentice intern, and I learned so much. Junior, senior year of high school, really just focused on working with him. And then again, that added another layer to it. Left high school and bounced around quite a bit all over the U.S. after that. But I will say in the summer of 1989, I was 14, and I had a chance to visit Edmond, Oklahoma. I came here to visit some basically family friends and had no idea that my future wife was running around that same summer. We probably passed each other. I mean, that was my only real connection. And then to Oklahoma City. However, in 2006, I was living in Austin, and I had the great fortune of working on a documentary for Richard Linklater. I was filming, it was a baseball documentary, and we came up and filmed the Big 12 Conference baseball tournament at the arena, the baseball stadium downtown. And that was another significant trip for me. That's the first time I saw the National Memorial downtown. And, I remember thinking at the time, wow, this city is really interesting to me. Then again, never came back until we visited. And then, like she said, I fell in love with it instantly. Because we were in the Paseo.
We had been here, obviously, to visit my family, but visiting family and like the suburbs and just kind of doing the family thing was very different. We had this experience for my high school reunion where I said, instead of like doing the family thing, let's do our own thing. And we got an Airbnb in the Paseo, and we just did the Oklahoma City experience without it being just about family in the suburbs. And that was, I think, a turning point for you where it was just, wait, what? Like, there's so much here. And we just hadn't immersed ourselves in this kind of new culture that was developing around Midtown and all of that.
Right.
So at that point, we decided it was right on the kind of coming out of COVID. And so we bought a house in the Paseo thinking we're going to just come and go. And my dad's aging and all of that, like, it'll be nice to be around family more often. But I found myself spending more and more time in this house and working remote, and ultimately discussed with the Downies, who I was, now been working with for years, could I relocate full time? And because we had all gone remote anyway for the most part, and frankly, our company had always been pretty flexible with that because we have so many productions shooting around the world, and they had been traveling globally, and whether they were in Atlanta or London on different, Marvel movies, or we'd done the Doolittle movie abroad, and so we already had been, prior to COVID, on kind of a Zoom relationship, and everyone was accustomed to working like that. So it didn't feel that crazy for me to not be physically in the office every day when they weren't. And so it doesn't feel like things have changed that much. So we ended up buying another house that could accommodate all of our animals. And so we
have
moved.
rescue animals.
Yes, that's our.
Okay, let's dive in. I have 2 dogs, so I'm a big dog fan.
Keep it.
Keep it that way.
Yeah.
2 is a good number.
Right. Before we get to the dogs in the house, what was it about Paseo and Oklahoma City that really captured you from that trip that you got to do it yourself without family and all the other things, and like got to like really immerse yourself in Oklahoma City?
It was the colors. It was the rainbow flags. Like, it was the murals. It was the people, the funky people with blue hair, piercings. I was like, man, this is a great place with like really cool young people. And that was something that I don't think fit the stereotype of Oklahoma, even that I had as a person that had visited a couple times. I just felt like this is like really cool, and not to compare them. So I'm not saying that to belittle Oklahoma City in the best way. I mean it as a compliment. It reminded me of some of the early days when I was first living in Austin. There was just a funky, crackling, creative energy right there. In Midtown, in the Paseo, in the Plaza. And I was very inspired by it. And I had been hearing about Lance for years, but I met Lance. And I met these guys, All Suite Studios down in Midtown. And we met Matt Payne and Rachel and some others that were doing all these filmmakers, film people. And that also meant something to me of like, oh man, people are really passionate about creativity. That's a draw to me. And not that isn't in LA, but everything is so spread out and fragmented. And there was an idea I'm from a small town, of being in a small town, but also really loving filmmaking, and then being surrounded by the influence of the Flaming Lips and the colors and the sounds and all that stuff. To me, I just was kind of smitten by that, I think.
And the just slower pace and the less density. And, COVID was really tough on LA. We had been through the social justice movement, and there was just a lot of kind of unrest, and then being in lockdown and coming here, because there's just less populace. So it just feels like you can breathe a little more. And so coming out of all that in LA, I love LA. I mean, I spent more of my life there, obviously, than here. So I have a lot of mixed feelings, and I'm very protective of the city. I feel like if you're from LA or you live in LA, you can kind of talk about it. But when other people do, I get defensive. But it has been through a lot. And I think at some point we just realized, like, this is so much bigger than us. Some of the just social ills and problems and things that were happening there that we couldn't fix, and was impacting our day-to-day lives and lifestyle, and whether it's the traffic or just some of the problems that were literally on our front door. And we had lived through the LA fires of 6 years ago, which really truly came right up to our neighborhood, and we were on standby with rented extra vehicles for our animals, and it was just really crazy. Had friends lost properties. So that was, again, 6 years ago, prior to what just happened. And being so close to that. And of course, there are natural disasters everywhere. But again, the density of the population, it was really kind of freaking me out. Like, if we had to get out of this place quickly with 10 million people trying to flee a city, just all that stuff was really spooky. So coming here with just so few people, and you don't have to wait in line for a restaurant, and there's no traffic. I literally send friends pictures of me driving on Broadway Extension at 5 o'clock, and I'm like, look at that traffic here. I'm going actual full speed.
I still get calls weekly, though, from my friends who are stuck in traffic in Los Angeles that are calling and saying, hey, man, you really are lucky that you got out when you did, because it's also getting more and more congested.
It's hard to believe.
Not less. And yeah, it's not even about, like she said, it's not about disparaging LA, but there's also just like, this is really cool. And I appreciate that we've been able to come here. It's been a few years now. And in that time, I have one of the coolest office spaces I've ever had in my life down in Old Historic Film Row area. So there's things that there's just space to kind of create. There's maybe a lack of a certain pressure that if you're an ambitious person, you can fill that. Like if you have a dream, maybe you can think there's not as many barriers to achieve that, or at least go for it. And so I feel like I'm in a really prolific phase of this. Even people that I met when I first came here as a visitor, now here we are years later, we've made a whole movie together with this guys I mentioned, All Sweet. And we have a really nice creative lifestyle here. And again, that is not putting down any other place, but it's just possible.
Right. The cost of living, obviously, I mean, hugely as far as the lifestyle upgrade that we were able to achieve here, and just the beautiful home and all the things that we could do. And it's just obviously a different.
And we currently live in Crown Heights, and there's a real community there. So it's also something I like to tell people. It's not all about film and art. That's great, and I'm glad we have friends that do that. But I've also really grown by living in a place where I can make friends with people who don't just do the same career. Some of the guys on my block have taken me into their cornhole games. So I've broadened my horizons.
Right.
I'm now playing cornhole at certain times of the year. But also learning about their lives, and there's an exchange, which I think if you're around people that are different than you, sometimes that also stimulates growth and helps. And so that's something I really appreciate.
I joke about, too, that it's like living amongst your test audience. I literally was on a pitch meeting yesterday with Hulu, and I always surprise people because anymore these meetings are all on Zoom. Like rarely do we ever do in-person pitches. And so, you're in the little boxes and stuff. And I actually had never met these executives before. And about halfway through the pitch, it came back to me, and I just mentioned and surprised everyone with, I'm sitting in Oklahoma, and you can reference like just conversations and things that you have with people that these New York and LA people, they're trying so hard to reach this audience, and they're sort of guessing about it. And I was able to reference real life conversations and things that I've had with people here that I'm like, I'm telling you, like, keeping my ear to the ground here, people are talking about this and that, and this is something they are interested in. And so that's been really useful. And also just that thing in living in LA, like I went to film school, and then you graduate from film school and all your peers kind of go into the same business. So you're friends with all these people pursuing the same thing. And then, you become friends with colleagues, and everyone around me for most of my life was in the same business. And so it's just a funny culture to like have your whole life be immersed in that same conversation. And, of course I had a few friends that weren't film people, but not very many. So being back here and then rekindling old friendships with high school friends who have stayed and they don't care, and that's so refreshing. Like they don't care about the film business. They don't really, it's
True.
just, it's so nice.
I would say real quick too. So when we came back, she mentioned it was for her high school reunion.
Yeah.
And her old friends that she had stayed in touch with throughout her life are some of the coolest people. And they live here, and they have all different kinds of interests, and they're just kind people that really like Emily for Emily. And that was something that really was apparent to me, because again, in say in our life in LA, it's hard to tell sometimes if someone like you for who you are or for your job or for what they think they can get. And it was refreshing to me to come to a place to see people that have known her since they were just kids, and they still had that kind of a love connection. And I think that has also been something for us, that we were able to come here and build off of that. There's a grounding force in that. And I just think that she has some of the coolest friends ever.
Shout out to class of 91, Heritage Hall. I mean, truly.
And Lance was a part of that group.
Yeah,
but
he's
there's
a little
others.
older, but yes, that was a good era of.
Yeah. But you don't find that everywhere, and it's important.
Yeah.
These are things that keep you honest, keep you real, keep you grounded, and that's a real testament, something that I saw when I come in here.
Yeah, especially the world that you're used to growing, you grew up in and you're used to, right? It's kind of cutthroat. Everyone's competitive. Everyone wants something. Everyone was working for themselves. There's very little we, I guess, versus, I, get me to where I'm at. And then, like I said, you come here and people just know you because they remember you from school.
Yeah.
And bring up probably silly, funny high school stories, right? And it's kind of softens the blow a little bit.
I do have those kind of friends in LA too. I mean, my core, like, there are so many good-hearted people. And again, I'm very careful to not discourage because I feel like similarly my college friends, really, really great people. And it's been so fun to kind of see everyone grow up and pursue different paths. In fact, back to my job, so Susan Downey and I went to film school together. And so I met her literally day one of orientation at USC Film School. And I remember looking down, we were sitting in a room and looking down this aisle of chairs and locking eyes with her because it was almost all guys in this freshman class at USC Film. And back then it was, now I think it's about 50-50 male-female, but very few women went to film school or were admitted back then. And so we immediately were like, we're the girls in the film school. And there were 2 other people, but, and then we just stayed friends all through college and had this interesting journey over our careers, sort of. She went a very traditional studio development route, and I went a more indie. Well, actually, my first job out of college, I turned around and drove back to Oklahoma and worked on Twister.
Oh, wow.
So I truly, didn't know what I was going to do. School was ending. As everyone, I think, in college, you're, trying to just finish school, not even sure what's next. And my mother had cut out not an article, she cut a photograph out of the Oklahoma newspaper and mailed it to me. And the little caption read that Steven Spielberg is producing a Jan de Bont directed movie in Oklahoma, but there was no article. And I was like, wait, what is this? She sent it to me because my college boyfriend at the time knew Jan de Bont, and he was a DP, and Alex wanted to be a DP, and they had made this kind of mentor relationship, and she had heard the name, and so she recognized that and sent me this clipping, and I was like, what? They're making a movie in Oklahoma? Holy cow. And so, again, pre-internet, pre-cell phone, I mean, the internet was just starting, but I was trying to figure out, how can I get on this movie? How can I get on this movie? And I don't remember how I got the number of the UPM, the production manager of Twister. And I called this guy, and Steve Brown, and was begging him for a job. And he was like, we've already hired, we're already, in pre-production. And I just was desperate to work on this movie. And so he was like, well, look, we really like to help out our USC friends. And somehow it came up, the cinematographer of Twister at the time was Don Burgess, who had shot Forrest Gump. So I was familiar with him. And I was in this kind of peripheral DP world because of my boyfriend at the time, who was really, pursuing a career as a DP. And so he knew who Don Burgess was. And I went to school with Dean Cundy's son. So Dean Cundy had shot Jurassic Park, and these were the top guys at the time. And so I knew Dean, and somehow this UPM mentioned to me that that Don Burgess wanted to talk to Dean Cundy about visual effects. And I was just a college kid, but I knew Dean. I think I must have name dropped because he probably asked, have you been on a real movie set? And I had visited Dean's sets. And he's like, oh, that's funny because Don and Dean, need to get together. And so I connected them. And somehow through that, Dean Cundy gave Don Burgess a referral and was like, you should hire her. And so Don Burgess invited me to come out to be his apprentice. I had no interest in cinematography. This was my boyfriend's thing. And I'm like, but that'll get me on the movie. And so then, being 22 and naive, I was like, can I bring my boyfriend? And so they were like, okay. So they basically brought Alex and I on as these cinematography trainees under Don Burgess, which was Alex's dream. And it ultimately got him into the union, and he was off and running and has had a stellar career and is a director now. But for me, I was like, how am I here in this camera department. It was grueling. I was the only woman of a crew of, maybe 25 guys. I have this wonderful photo of me on the back of the camera truck surrounded by all the guys. I think I'm holding the slate or something. And anyway, it was incredibly difficult. That movie was just, at the time, it was the largest budget movie to date. It predated Titanic. So it was really exciting, though, to be able to come back to Oklahoma and have that experience.
And it's funny that the USC connection gets you on that versus you being from Oklahoma gets you on it.
Right.
When you start that story, I'm like, oh, there's got to be someone in Oklahoma that gets you. No, totally different, which
totally
I love. It's
different.
Awesome.
And I will credit the USC thing. I mean, I could probably go through my entire career and point to, they talk about the USC mafia, in film, and it is kind of true. Almost every single job I've ever had has been through some USC connection. So back to Susan. So I went off to Twister and then came back, and it really was this kind of new media moment, and went into indie film and digital and web stuff. Susan worked her way up in development, and then our lives kind of crisscrossed. We stayed very close friends, but ultimately, I was at Disney working at Disney.com doing new media productions there. And she, of course, was with Robert by this point. We had some Iron Man crossover. And then, 8 years ago, she asked, I had left Disney, and she asked if I wanted to come work for them, overseeing a digital strategy. But that whole digital new media YouTube world was really changing. I had worked for Maker Studios, which was at the time the largest multi-channel network of YouTubers. So there was this era of these MCNs like Full Screen and Machinima, and that moment, whenever that was, 10 years ago, they actually became investors in Maker. And again, we just kept kind of crisscrossing, but that was starting to kind of, I don't want to say collapse, but it was evolving. And I wasn't sure what that meant for them, because I didn't think Robert wanted to be a YouTube star. Right. And so what are we going to do? How is this going to work? And but I went to work for them, and it really evolved into, we made a show for YouTube, but a premium series that was a doc series. And so from that, it just elevated me into this documentary space. So I have now basically been overseeing all of their docs and unscripted for the last however many years. So.
That series that they made was called The Age of AI, and it's still available. People can go and watch it on YouTube, and it's really
supposedly cool. We were told it's the most watched science show of all time, but because it's on YouTube, people don't realize, but it was a premium full 8-episode hour-long doc series. Yeah. And at the time, YouTube really was trying to get into the market as competitors to Netflix and Hulu, and they wanted to be an original streamer, but then that didn't really work out for YouTube, so they shut down their originals team. But we were one of the first shows to come through there. And
so. Kevin, you shared earlier about Mr. Muller and his VHS, kind of that's how it starts, and you get a VHS camera. Emily, where does it start for you? Why do you want to go to film school when you're young, and why then USC? What is that kind of light bulb moment you think, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
When I was little here, I wanted to be, my earliest memories, dancing and acting, and, I started taking little classes wherever I could in Edmond, Oklahoma, ballet and things, and doing as much theater as I could. In fact, I have a soft spot for Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park. I took acting classes there when I was in high school, when they were at their very earliest stages. So I really wanted to do theater and acting as a kid, but then I loved writing. And so I think in high school, I started thinking I should make things. But again, you had a little more of that on-hands thing. We had a home video camera. I made a couple of little things, but not as much. I was definitely more writing, but thinking about directing and doing stuff in high school, like stage managing the theater, productions and whatever I could. But then I learned about UCLA first through football, of course, being in Oklahoma. But my dad, I think he kind of caught wind, and he's like, UCLA, like acting and all of that, when I was 6 years old. So I had this idea that I wanted to go to UCLA. And then when I was 8 years old, which is just crazy to think, my dad was like, well, what about USC? There's UCLA and USC. And then he had a friend here who had 2 daughters who were older than me, quite a bit older, who both went to USC. And when I was in 6th grade, they brought me a T-shirt that I still have from USC. And they were both Pi Phis, which is a sorority at USC. And so it just got in my head. And I just stayed on this path of wanting to go. And then oddly, somehow my dad was connected to Lou Diamond Phillips. I think someone through Oklahoma, like his ex-wife was from here. And I got into film school. But I had this moment because I got this big scholarship to Pepperdine too. You apply to different schools, and my dad, through Lou Diamond Phillips, he was like, "That girl needs to go to USC Film School. Like, you don't turn down USC Film School." So the scholarship money is always this time. I got some scholarship to USC, but not. I think I got like the full ride thing at Pepperdine, which was hard to turn down. But
yeah,
I ended up at SC. So the life path that just stayed the course.
You shared a little bit about your kind of journey and going into college and after that and leading into kind of where you are now. Kevin, what about yourself? What's like that kind of 18 to 25 range of your career and how you get on the ladder and things start moving and pivotal experiences, people you meet? Tell me about that time in your life.
Oh, to make it pretty concise, after high school, I bounced around to various community colleges. Mm-hmm. And my best friend actually went to USC. And I was kind of jealous, to be honest. Like, man, he went right into the film school and has had a lifelong crew as a result of that, like the USC Mafia or whatever. So I started off at LA City College, and I was just up the street from USC. And I would go sit in audit classes with him. They had the best screenings at USC. And at some point I realized I can't be living in my friend's shadows. And by the way, LA City College at the time had a really cool documentary program. And that's where I first got exposed to some of the greatest documentaries of all time. I mean, it was an immersive course. Mm-hmm. And I realized my dream was to go to New York. So after about 6 months of going to LA City College and realizing that I was kind of tagging along to my best friend's journey at USC, I decided to go do my own thing, and I went out to New York. And within a very short time, I met a guy named Carter Smith, and he's like, you and I, kid, we're going to make rock and roll movies together. He's called me kid. I mean, he was only 5 years older than me, but kind of like an older brother. And I really did love old rock and roll documentaries. And so by 1996 and 7, when I was 20 and 21, respectively, started filming rock and roll documentary specifically, not so much music videos, but tours, rehearsals. And one thing led to another. And by 1997, he and I were doing Stone Temple Pilots shows. We filmed Bush, went on tour with the band Bush. And then ultimately it led to a feature film with Jane's Addiction. And that became this 5-year odyssey. The actual film was shot in 97, but then we shot more kind of pickups and things with the band into 1998 and continued editing that movie. And we actually just had a really long road with it. And that led to even doing stuff with some of the Jane's Addiction solo offshoots, the band members' solo projects. And then I just was in a music industry kick for a while, and then ultimately never went back to school. I had, at one point in New York, went to School of Visual Arts. And I kind of thought for a half a second, like, I'm going to actually do this. This will be my film school, and I'll stay with it. And that lasted 1 semester, and I had a chance to go film a rock band and get paid to go on the road. And I just never went back. And so it's been pretty cool. But I think it was the year 2000 during the presidential election, some producers, that liked the work that Carter and I did filming rock bands wanted to tap us to come and see, could you film in this kind of cool rock and roll style, but on a political documentary? And that created this incredible opportunity to follow Philip Seymour Hoffman around the 2000 presidential election. Republican convention, Democrat convention, all kinds of protests and things that were going on. That movie is called The Party's Over. And that was the thing that I think kind of turned my life and career from just being a music documentary guy, filming music, to now it was politics. And then that opened up. Next thing you know, years later, that leads to sports and all kinds of stuff. But that was a pivotal turning point. And then I've had a lot of activity over the years since then. But what's really cool is this past year, I've been able to team up, to collaborate with the OG, Carter. And we've done this Sting documentary together. So it's kind of a return to our music roots together. And he still calls me the kid, but reluctantly acknowledges that I'm older.
There's also sort of a neat kismet thing within all of this that ties together, because me having worked on Twister, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in Twister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Kevin knew Phil through that project. So many years later, in 2013, I happened to be in New York City for these digital new fronts, like the upfronts, and we were hosting a party when I worked at Maker Studios with Snoop, and at the time I was like Snoop's person at our company. He had a YouTube channel that I was like his partner or whatever, and so he was DJing our big party at the YouTube like upfront new fronts, and Hoffman came with a colleague of mine. But I was so busy sort of managing all this stuff with Snoop, which, can I say that part? We can always edit this out. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this, but there was a whole thing with this hotel because they didn't want weed in the hotel. Yeah. And I was like, it's Snoop Dogg. Do you understand? You agreed to this party. And I was like managing this insanity around like whether Snoop could smoke in this hotel. But I had wanted to say hi to Philip and like, oh, remember Twister? I hadn't seen him since then. But then the next night, I mentioned it to my colleague and was like, oh, I was really sad I didn't say hi to Hoffman. And he said, well, actually, I'm going to go see him again tonight at this party if you want to come with me. And it was so late already, and I had meetings early in the morning, and we were at all these after parties. And I remember turning to my boss, like, should I go with this guy to this party? And I was single at the time. And he's like, if you want the story, go for the story. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this party. It's like so late. And so I go to this party at this, and I walk in. It's just an apartment on the Lower East Side with a bunch of guys hanging out, and Hoffman and Kevin Ford. And so
it was my friend Carter's apartment.
It was Carter's
just
apartment.
having a little gathering.
And that's how we met. So if it weren't for Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, and then they talked, but the next day, Phil said, you should totally date her. She's really cool. And he was a guy that if he gave you advice, it was good advice. He actually gave it. He was like, she's really cool, man. You should totally date her. Because I was single, too. Yeah. So it kind of just worked out. But
we also have photos because Carter is also a still photographer, and he saw us talking that night, and he took these 2 shots of us at this party, our first meeting, and they're so great, and it's just precious to like have that memorialized. But so there will always be this special place for us with Phil, and that whole just connection. So like cool. Literally would not have met without that, because there was no reason for me to go.
Wait, also because that just jogged a memory. But back when you asked what was that period, 18 to 25, I'm not trying to make it rosier than it was. It was really rough. I was trying to find my own path, and I was filming rock bands, but the music industry is really hard, especially then, trying to get paid off these gigs. And I was feast or famine, just riding the waves, starving artist, but fully committed and making cool things. And Hoffman was a guy that I could call and did call. and who would say, you've got to hang in there. You've got the talent. And he himself used examples of when he was trying to make it. And he is like, look, he's like, how old are you now? I said, 24. He's like, when I was 24, I was living on my friend's couch. And he's like, you have the passion, you have the commitment, you've just got to hang in there. And I remember at one point he read me some great quote from John Cassavetes, and he said, that quote is on my wall, Kevin, taped to the wall. And he goes, I need it, you need it. But he was that type of guy. He was very generous with, if you were talented and you were in it for the right reasons, he was encouraging. So also many years later, despite his life ending in a tragic way, in his heart, he was someone that really encouraged people to like do the best and go for it. And so that meant a lot to me because I didn't have a lot of mentors in that period. And I think he was just a little bit older, and I listened when he said, hey, I struggled, and you just got to stick with it. And so along the way, there were things like that kept me going.
That was going to be my next question, was like, what keeps you going? It's perfect. What was it then about, you mentioned the music stuff, and then that obviously leads into the political stuff, but you mentioned that the political guys wanted your style that you used in the music. What was it, the music that brought that style out of you, or was that your style you just kind of developed over time that you saw something unique? Like, dive into the style for me so we can paint a picture of what that looks like for people listening. Yeah,
the style was like, you're around back then bands that are a lot of times on drugs and are very sensitive. And so what you can't do is come barging in and make it about you and, hey, we're going to set up all these lights. And like, you can't control it. If anything, you had to learn, Carter and I both, how to tuck behind an amplifier, how to maybe hide in the cables, do whatever you could to just kind of stay out of the way and not get in people's face. And in that, try to really capture and convey something cool. And so we became really good at not trying to control things, but also trying to disappear within it and get something of like real substance. All these years later, we did the same thing on the Sting film. We did not come barging in. Someone recently saw the rough cut and they said, well, how did you light this? And I said, the window? We didn't. I didn't even have lights like this because that he's songwriting. He's working with his band. You can't have it be about us and what we're trying to do. It's not a movie set. It's documentary. Yeah. And so in those working around these bands, they were very sensitive to, their creative process. And if you could kind of blend in, you could actually get some things, but you had to practice the art of disappearing, which is hard because anyone, as you know, with the camera, it changes and influences the whole environment. So we had a lot of practice with that. Cut to the political world, using those same techniques. We were there, for example, I remember filming George W. Bush doing a microphone check before he accepted the nomination later that night, but it was early in the day, and it was just like a sound check, and he was goofing off, and we got this incredible, it was really fun footage that you wouldn't normally expect. And I don't know if his team even knew that I was filming it because I was kind of tucked in and down. I mean, I'm sure if they knew, they would have been like, hey, cut that camera or something, because he wasn't acting presidential at the time. He was just making jokes and like tapping on the mic and literally like goofing off. But that made for really cool footage. And so we would try to bring some of those techniques. And then also we were with Hoffman. And so, sometimes he would be kind of in a thing and maybe people talking to him didn't even realize that I was 3 people over and he was mic'd and I was filming him or something.
Something just observing to Kevin and then now being so immersed in this doc space, and so many of these commercial feature docs and doc series today are so slick and so produced. And I was speaking to this very successful doc producer earlier this week, and he's like, look, if they don't look like a Christopher Nolan movie now, like anyone can do that. They've upped the production value, but it's almost becoming kind of this sanitized thing where they all are starting to kind of feel alike. But there's something, and it's just that je ne sais quoi thing. Like, Kevin has an ability with some of these personalities to get access and this intimacy and trust that I don't care how many, lights or crew or whatever the composition, there's just something special that you're able to get, and these people trust you. Like, he's done some things with Adrian Brody, and he just took him to Germany on a project, and they made a doc together years ago. And Robert as well, like, has, you know, brought Kevin in and wants to collaborate, and now Sting, and these people that wouldn't normally allow that kind of access, but it's a trust thing, and you do have an ability to just capture stuff that not everyone can get, I think.
Right, like, for example, Robert, when we collaborated on a film together through her company called Senior, but ultimately it was about his dad battling Parkinson's, and talk about having to be sensitive, and you can't just come barging in. Like, it's not about you, but that was a very precious, delicate time. His dad was actually battling for his life. Robert was aware, we were all aware that it was, you know, it wasn't going to last forever. But at the same time, without being obnoxious, how do you get in there and just cover it in a beautiful way, a compassionate way? And if you ever see that film,
it's on Netflix.
we were there with his dad until the final days, and it's not a depressing thing. It's actually really beautiful. It's a tribute to a father and a son, and the creative process itself, because both guys were so creative, the father and the son. Right. And so even some of their final conversations are still like, it just feels like they're still in a way collaborating together or something. It was really beautiful and touching. And without all those years of practicing disappearing, how could I be in the room with them and not influence that moment? But I don't think that they were thinking about me. Yeah. I was just part of the, you know, wallpaper at that point or something.
What is it for both of you? What is it about that documentary side that, Kevin, sounds like it really grabbed you from a young age, and Emily, sounds like you went to go the movie side first, and then the documentary side is kind of pulled out of you more recently in your career. What is it about those moments, those special things that want you to stay in the documentary, that raw and that real content, versus the written, produced, like, wow, I just took this from an idea to, you know, Michael Bay, explosions, Transformers, and all that nonsense, like all that stuff. I love those movies, by the way.
Sure.
It's not nonsense. Yeah, what is it out for a documentary that kind of, you know, gets you going and pulls you out?
I mean, I still love narrative, and I am fortunate that that's our core business at our company, and so I get to be sort of associated, even though it's not my direct, you know, I'm not participating in the development of most of the features or TV series. It is still our core business, and so I'll do things adjacent and try to support them. But the doc space, for me, what was interesting is I think the speed at which we can get projects going, and the narrative development world is, I mean, just even more difficult than ever. They're very expensive. And again, I'm fortunate. I'm at a company, we have first look deals we have a feature deal, both narrative and docs, with Netflix, and then our TV series deal for both narrative and unscripted is with HBO. So, you know, very few people even have that anymore. Like, it's just crazy how difficult this business has become. So this long game of development, which funnily enough, I think Robert even doesn't love development, because it's just, there's not a quick return, but docs seem to, you can get something greenlit and then you're in it, and especially when something is time sensitive and it's like, this thing is happening in real time, we're not making it up. Like, we need to go, unless it's an archival, you know, sure, historical story, but a lot of times you're doing follow docs and present day things, and we got to go. So that has been great.
For me, it's I would say, going back to LA City College, that documentary course I had, I was first made aware of these films by D.A. Pennebaker, the Maysles brothers, and their whole thing was to make real life look and feel, capture it like a movie. So as a guy that I was born and raised on Hollywood movies, one of my favorite movies of all time is Beverly Hills Cop. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, I'm a kid of the 80s, so I love all of the Hollywood stuff, but I also like being in a real moment and taking a step out of my own head and thinking, how would Spielberg capture this scene? So there's Robert and his dad together. That's really happening. I can't control it. I can't light it. What's the best frame I can get and get calm and get centered? And in my mind, I'm filming a movie, but it's all real. And so having studied, I love independent and feature filmmaking just as much as I do documentary. Yeah. So I think of those compositions and frames, and sometimes you just got to hold it. I think there's a stereotype where people in docs just go nuts, and they're whipping the camera around and they're jumping around, and they're like, and again, changing the energy of that room that they're in. So I like to almost approach documentary in a different way, where I just get calm and settled and look for movie frames, even though it's real life. I have had the chance to do a couple indie features, narratives, and I want to do more. And in that case, I also try to reverse it, where I want those actors to just bring the scene to life and forget I'm there. Yeah. So even though I could control it, I want to, at that time, still just witness it, observe it, and try to always capture it in the most cinematic way. And so for me, there is any beauty that's in the documentaries, even our new one, 67 Bombs to Enid. The photography is beautiful, but it's all real. There's nothing staged, but I think I've gotten pretty good at just seeing real life and quickly identifying visually frames that are very cinematic. And so that's important to me, that I want real life to come across as beautiful as it is, because the best movies show you life in a way that makes you feel like life is beautiful. And I think documentaries can be the same way, without being the antiseptic version you talk about, where it's just overly produced. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Can I say, you mentioned Spielberg, like, I think anyone, especially of our era, grew up with Spielberg, he's kind of this ultimate whatever, and we've had little crisscrosses over the years, but for us it was neat, because when we made Senior, Robert shared the movie with Spielberg, and he texted us right after Steven called him and had watched it and was raving about the movie, and it was oh my gosh, Steven Spielberg loved our movie. And then we ended up going on this, Netflix was a wonderful partner and distributor, and they really put an awards campaign together for Senior, and so we learned all about that as well, and which is another podcast. But the journey through an award season. But we won the National Board of Review Best Documentary that year, which was really special. And it was the same year that Spielberg had won for his film that was the biographical. What was the movie? Oh my gosh. So Spielberg was there in the room when we accepted our award.
Fabelmans. Right,
the Fabelmans. And so it was just a really neat, full circle that we were on the same stage receiving an award as Spielberg. So it was a childhood moment, I think, for a kid of the 80s. And then recently, Robert did a Broadway show called McNeil. So he brought Kevin in to document from soup to nuts this whole Broadway experience. So right now we're in kind of early stages of figuring out if we're going to be able to make a doc out of this. Yeah. But Spielberg was there, and he got to film them having a whole conversation about the play.
Yeah, that was trippy when you take the perspective of what I've described, of how I look at life, and it's a movie scene, and suddenly there I was actually filming Spielberg and Robert having a conversation and trying to get it in a very cool, cool frame, and oh man, I can't F this up. And I rack focus between them, and it was just great, because I was I'm also a movie geek at my heart, and so it's how is this even possible that I've got this guy now in my lens as a guy? I started from a town of 500. There was no chance for this.
Similarly, he had an experience with Paul McCartney, because Paul came backstage and Robert introduced them and told Paul that he had made Senior, and having Sir Paul compliment, he was raving about the movie. It's just so mind-blowing. I was do you understand? That is literally I don't think it gets any better than having a Beatle tell you that they loved your work. That's it. You can die happy.
And just to prove the point, I took a still out of my footage of Sir Paul and Robert and printed it on metal, and it's in my office. And I look at that all the time. And I was like, man, if nothing else, that happened. That meant a lot to me to see that. And
and that was the trip. I didn't go to New York, and I was like, oh, of course.
Also, real quick, I don't know who it was. Somewhere along the journey, one of my film classes, because again, I bounced around to various courses at LA City College. I took some summer classes at NYU, SVA. Somewhere in there, one of the professors said, you should be able to pause your footage at any moment because it's 24 frames per second. And every one of these frames should be something you could print, should be a real photo. And if not, you need to think about what you're doing. Now, obviously, if I'm on you and I pan over here, maybe that's not a great, but I really internalized what that person said. Yeah. So in the moment, as I'm grabbing shots, real life or with actors, I try to really think, is this something that could be printed out? Now, in the case of Robert and McCartney, literally, I took a still out of that footage and printed it, and it's on metal, and it's in my office, and I gaze at that, and I think, I'm so glad it was in focus. Yeah. But that was cool advice that the guy gave.
Yeah, right. And the thing that came to my mind straight away is with the documentary stuff, like because it's real time, it's very intense, but it's also like you have one chance to capture this moment, so you've got to be very good at what you do and apply all the things you've learned over the time, and disappear into a corner, or whether it's just staying still, right, and not panning because something else is going on over here, but you're locked into this because this could be a huge moment. But then also thinking, oh, I got to give up that over there. It's very exciting, and it's not just you're pressing play or record and being like, kind of what I'm doing, right? It's just asking you questions. Yeah. There's that side of documentaries as well that just show B-roll, and it's depending on the historical type or in movement. But moving this towards kind of like current day, the thing I was thinking of as well is that in today's world, it's so easy to document their entire, people's entire lives, and a lot of content is going more towards whether it's the YouTube stuff that you mentioned, Emily, but it's more raw and basic and hand to camera and just versus that big produced stuff. What has it been like for you guys to see the entire growth and ups and downs of the movie industry, the documentary industry, with technology coming along? And you mentioned YouTube, and YouTube stars are mega famous now. They're in all the commercials, and I don't really watch TV, but I did the other day, and I think it was Speed, with the guy who's the super fast guy, was in a commercial with like Tom Brady and other people, and I asked the person I was with, like, do you recognize the main character? And she was like, I have no idea who that is. I'm like, well, that's like a huge YouTube star. But what's that been like, and what's it like to see people be creative because of their iPhone in their pocket, or their Samsung, or whatever it is, like, or their GoPro, or their DJI Osmo 3, which is the greatest thing in the world at the moment. What's that like to be from your background, your world, to see whether it's people that you mentor or friends around, to be like, you can literally just pick up a camera and start documenting your life?
So it's funny because I feel like I was on the front end of all of that in the 90s, frankly. Like the earliest pre-YouTube days, like some of us coming out of film school, we knew, because the internet was starting, something was going to change. And so that's how and why I kind of got into all that, because we saw an opportunity. Like, I could be producing and making short form content and getting this stuff on the internet. Like, my biggest career sort of failure or regret is that I wasn't more embedded with the tech people who really launched the technology around that. But I was involved with original creators, and literally one of our good friends was one of the first YouTube stars. Like, I was involved in this production of Kelly's Shoes. I don't know if anyone remembers, from like 2005, maybe.
On YouTube?
2006. When did YouTube start? Liam Sullivan. Actually, I was supposed to produce the video, and then I had a wedding to go to. And so my friends made this video of Kelly's Shoes. So I was collaborating.
That has 70 million views, by the way. It's 18 years ago.
My God.
And that might be a relaunch of it. I feel like he's had different versions of it.
Liam Kyle Sullivan's the page it's on? Okay.
Wow. Because I think it got pulled down and put back. Anyway, but Liam was one of the original YouTubers. And at the time, a lot of these friends of mine who had come out of also theater school at USC, we were trying to figure out ways to get above just the normal TV creative executive pathway, and how can we do this? And frankly, in like 99, 2000, I went to work at a company called pop.com, which was Imagine. So Brian Grazer, Ron Howard, and Spielberg, and Paul Allen, Vulcan Ventures, they had this company that was one of the earliest .com digital entertainment companies, and they were ahead of the curve, and they were trying to make digital content, 5-6 years before YouTube. We were making short form content. They spent tens of millions of dollars on this company, and the streaming connections at that time just were not advanced enough to support the content. And so they shut down the company. But I was there, I was watching all of this. There were so many of these new media companies that we were trying to be creative and do these, we were getting these like short form jobs, making just short videos. And then when YouTube happened, Liam did his Kelly's Shoes. We got a show with VH1. These actors had a consortium and they were doing live sketch comedy. So again, we knew these sketches, these short form things within this sketch comedy, we were making videos. So you would go to a live show in LA, and it was this immersive thing where there would be a band and sketches, and they would throw to these short videos that all ahead of YouTube. Kelly's Shoes happened. VH1 saw the show, the live show, and said, we want to do something with you guys. And so we made the first scripted show at VH1. But at that time, YouTube had just launched. Kelly was blowing up. Viral was just happening. And we put his character in our show. And then we made YouTube videos to accompany the series that was on VH1. Our YouTube videos did better numbers than the broadcast show, and VH1 didn't understand, and Viacom was mad, and they shut it down. And we started a war between literally Viacom and Google with YouTube over this IP stuff. And we were like, no, you don't understand. This is helping the show. We're marketing the show by putting up these videos. Yeah. And again, this was pre-Facebook. We had MySpace characters. Yeah. So for our characters from our TV show, we made MySpace characters. So we were thinking about all this stuff. So I always was like, this is coming, and we're going to disrupt whatever's happening with broadcast television. So there was no Netflix. And yet we kept saying, this is coming, this is coming. But unfortunately, what happened, I have so many friends that were executives in this early soup of the digital era, but we were all over here while TV executives were watching, and then they kind of like gobbled it all up. And so all these television creatives went to work at Netflix and went to work at these digital streamers. And I feel like a lot of the early days sort of Gen Xers like myself who were on the forefront of the digital world got a little bit left behind, because these creatives from the television space really did absorb that. So now you have this next generation of just pure YouTubers. So once the streaming platforms happened, and it's almost like bifurcated, because streaming became a thing, but then there's this, UGC kind of influencer community. So this next generation is like, we don't even care about this big streamer companies. We're just on these platforms, and became influencers. I really see them as just two completely independent things. However, casting directors are like, how many, followers do you have to put you on this TV show? It's crazy. I don't know. I don't begrudge them their existence, but in the doc space separately, the business of documentary that has really changed, that has been a challenge, has been this commercialization. So everyone's chasing the money of documentary, and these platforms and streamers, it's a business. It's become a big business. Mm-hmm. So what was once mostly advocacy filmmaking, if you really look back at the history of docs, like so many of these documentarians were storytelling about, the plight of whatever, you name it, fill in the blanks. Now with true crime and sports and music docs and these big commercial things, sadly, a lot of those more advocacy films and things are getting lost behind, and it's left behind. It's been difficult, and so even for us, I'm like, my goodness, I work for a movie star, and Robert started something called the Footprint Coalition, which was or is an environmental initiative. He really wanted to plant his flag in something and use his megaphone for good. And after we made The Age of AI, someone said to him, there is the technology on this planet to solve our climate crisis if we could just bond and band together and really figure this out. And so he has really been focusing on green tech and those kind of positive solutions. And so I've been trying to create media projects around that, all very positive. We made a show called Downey's Dream Cars, where he eco-modified a fleet of his vintage cars, and we did a sweepstakes giveaway for all the cars to raise money for the foundation. We won an Emmy. It was a great experience, but it's been difficult to sell these climate-friendly shows because the market just doesn't want that. Like, they want true crime, and so that's been really interesting. So I think for anyone that's an outlier, I'm literally like, I have Academy Award-winning filmmakers and a movie star. And even with those components, you can't always sell a show. And it's a business first. So
and now
you've seen it all, right? That's the cool thing.
We've seen it all. And right now, with my friend Ty McMahon, who co-directed it, and Brandon Cobes, who produced it, they're all sweet. We have the 67 Bombs to Enid, which is kind of a classic old school doc, meaning we did it independently. We shot it because there was an important issue right up 2 hours north of here in Enid, where you had people from the Marshall Islands that had come to Oklahoma, and there was a question, why are they here? And then you learn it's because we, as the United States, detonated 67 atomic bombs in the Marshall Islands just to see what would happen as experimenting.
Wow.
The islands are still radioactive to this day. And so many of the islanders have ended up here as part of a kind of a compact agreement with the U.S. government that says you can come here and work and live almost like a permanent green card.
Because we've destroyed your homeland.
Yeah.
And you can't become
Oklahoma.
a citizen, and you can't get health care, and you're treated like a brown person, not to get political. These ideas that you're an outlier. Like, they're not. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, but the point being is that this was an issue. We decided to take our equipment, our time, and document it and make it. And ultimately, through some of our producers, we were able to get it to Errol Morris, who is one of the preeminent documentary filmmakers of our lifetime. He agreed to put his name on as an executive producer. And so we have this film that is, I would say it's not political, but it's just raising awareness about a subject, and it's a portrait of a community. And it's really tough to find viewers.
Yeah.
Not find viewers, to find someone willing to distribute the movie.
To get to viewers.
To get to viewers.
So I'm just saying it's an uphill battle. It's because if the film was celebrity driven or about true crime or about sports, we'd probably have a faster track. And it's about people that have suffered the effects of radiation and stuff like that. Sounds really interesting.
It is.
Right? Some of the feedback we got along the way from people who were considering helping us was like, wow, it's so important, so interesting, such a beautiful sizzle reel you guys are showing us, but it's just not the right time for us right now. It's the market wants this or that. So we persevered. We made the film anyway, and we're so proud that we're launching it at Deadcenter Film Festival in June. And you know what? The sky's the limit. We're going to push it and take it everywhere we can independently. But I'm just saying it is difficult to get eyeballs in today's world where, partly how you get the eyeballs is these streamers or the people that help you. So we're going to do what we can independently, and it's a beautiful film. So, but I would just add, you asked about iPhones, and these things are so powerful.
They're so good.
4K, 24 frames per second, you can set it. You can do slow-mo. And so I'm an old dog, but I'm learning new tricks. I've been incorporating this subtly, even when I'm doing documentaries that have like bigger, more robust cameras. I have found that I am able to integrate footage that I'm shooting on an iPhone, and I've been practicing that. So I think it's incredible that young people now, this technology in your hands with the stabilization built into it. I mean, it's pretty incredible. So instead of kind of rejecting it and being like, well, I'm from another generation, we need a bigger camera. I have found even on our film 67 Bombs to Enid, even on the Sting film, we're working that iPhone in there because what it does is allow you to be in certain spots where you couldn't get a bigger camera. And then also, just as a fan, I go to Thunder games. Oh man, I have so much fun filming. Like the other day, I got some cool footage of SGA warming up. Just a total fanboy moment. I'm there with my iPhone, capturing it. Later, go on Instagram, set it to some hip song. And so I actually love experimenting and playing with the technology as well. Even the fact that through that social platform, they have it where you can set it to some of your favorite music or whatever. Well, if I was making a film, you'd have to license that, and it's the whole thing. So I'm trying to stay part of that experiment, stay fresh, and part of that is experimenting with the use of this kind of technology in your pocket and the social platforms, as opposed to kind of rejecting it. I'm trying to, but also I'm not pretending that I'm some young guy. I'm now 50, but it's just fun. And so I can't even imagine what a young person can do with this technology, and maybe that'll open up new things. I'm not sure.
I think, too, for young people, the point of entry to the mainstream right now with these distributors is very difficult. And there really is 10 filmmakers right now are filmmakers that are getting their movies made in the doc space. And I have the good fortune of being able to work with some of these people, and that, it's by association with my company. And it's funny, actually, there were for years 2 filmmakers. I always used to joke that I want to work with the 2 Morgans, Morgan Neville and Brett Morgan. They were 2 kind of doc filmmakers, heroes of mine. Even though I wasn't really in the doc space, I watched them and I loved their work. So if you're not familiar, check out Morgan Neville. He won the Academy Award for 20 Feet from Stardom. He did Won't You Be My Neighbor, on and on, wonderful, wonderful movies, the Mr. Rogers documentary. And then Brett Morgan, I had seen a movie he made back in 1999. I remember I went to a screening of his. First time I'd ever heard of him. It was called The Kid Stays in the Picture. If you're a Hollywood fan, it's a must-see about Bob Evans and kind of old school Hollywood. But at the time, I'd never seen anything like it. And he used technology in the earliest of days to do this 3D cutouts, moving through the photos that now you see everywhere. You completely take it for granted, but that was all Brett. He originated that, and everyone copies him now. But it's a wonderful movie. And then over the years, I would see his movies, and then Kevin and I met and found out he really admired Brett, and we went to see his Kurt Cobain film Montage of Heck together, and we would fan stalk him and talk to him after. And we went to his Jane Goodall documentary and talked to him there. And over the years, we were just oh, Brett Morgan. But then they met and became friends kind of on this senior tour. Brett was touring with Moon Age Daydream and the David Bowie doc. And so now we both have projects with Brett Morgan, which has just been really cool. And then Morgan Neville, similarly, I don't even remember how I pursued Morgan, but I ended up, now I've been collaborating on some things with Morgan Neville that we've been pitching. And so it's just, you can manifest things, but back to what I was going to say about young people, those are the filmmakers that get in the room and get movies greenlit. So, but as a young person, now is the time to build followers, to get your things seen, doing short form content that could make a splash. And that is what would ultimately potentially get you in the door with one of these streamers to frankly, maybe shadow direct or get hired to, work under one of these guys. Because what I've learned is so many of them, like we worked with Chris Smith, and they have companies and they're so prolific. They have many films and series going on simultaneously. So they'll hire other shooters and other directors to come in and do episodes and things like that. So it's a good way to get work. But to just get your movie made, and it's very difficult times right now. So truly finding your voice through these free services, whether it's TikTok or YouTube, and making your short form videos is a really good way to also practice your art. I know everyone needs an income, and that's always tricky too. Here's my other young person advice that was given to me when I worked on Twister. I'll never forget it, and I always tell kids this. The writer of Twister at the time said he finds so many young people get out of the business to get into it, meaning I'm going to just work this job over here, and this will pay my bills so I can be writing at night or making my short films on the side, but I'm going to work at this bank, or I'm going to take this job at this restaurant. And he's like, get a job in the business. It doesn't matter what it is. I know you want to be a filmmaker or a screenwriter, but just go to work in some capacity in this business. You've got to stay in the business to be of the business and network and meet people and also do your writing and your filmmaking, but just work in this business.
Yeah.
You got to be around it, right?
Exactly.
Because like I said, you never know who you're going to meet, run into, and connect, through, like I said, the story you told right at the beginning about how you get into Twisters because of a connection. You connect two people. It's the way of the world. And I think I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of just ooh, shiny new thing. Let's go do that. But I really want to do this. But this paying me right now. All these things. I get the feeling I could sit here and talk to you guys for 10 hours. I could tell stories that I just and we'll definitely do this again and just keep checking in with you guys because you're both doing awesome things. I realized I'm following you on Instagram, and so I did see your SGA thing.
I'm telling you, man, it's so fun.
It's so good, and obviously, you said there's so many ways to be creative here. But finishing up a little bit, I don't want to tell me about your animals. We can't miss that out.
Let me paraphrase.
What's the house like, and how's the animal right now?
Let me just try to quickly paraphrase because it'll be another episode. But
you can just tell me what you have.
we have a variety of rescue cats and dogs that we've saved 3. But she works and does cat, trapping, spay, neuter.
TNR, trap, neuter, and return, or trap, neuter, release. So I work primarily, volunteer for the Oklahoma Humane Society, and they have a clinic. So we have been really working hard to fix as many feral cats as possible. We need fosters. That's the big missing piece right now. And to foster an animal, they pay for all the expenses. Yeah. You literally just need to bring a pet into your home. For dogs, you basically see them through their surgery and rounds of shots, and then they go to their adoption center. With cats, once they are fixed, they can go straight to the adoption center and stay there until they're adopted. But it is kitten season right now, and so we are in dire need of fosters.
And many of what I've learned just vicariously watching over her shoulder, a lot of the animals are traumatized just because they have such a rough life on the streets. If you can ever just give them a break for a few days, a week, 2 weeks, you will see the animal decompress and chill, and that's when they start to become affectionate. And a lot of times people are like, I don't like these nasty little strays or these feral cats. Yeah. But those animals are just stuck in a traumatic state where they're like so tense and so stressed and so scared. If they can ever just relax and go, I'm safe, that's when you'll see them start to be more affectionate and like what people want when they want pets. And so it just takes patience. And that's kind of the idea maybe that I've learned from watching some of these cats that have been saved. Their personalities can come out if they can just be in a safe space. So as people, maybe we could be a little more aware of that and just try to create a safe space for animals, and then you can see them actually start to emerge.
I love it. I'm a pet person. I did have cats growing up, and so I get the cat thing side of it too.
Yeah.
Pets are the best. Last question. My day job's real estate, so I'd love to finish with this one. If you were to build your dream home today, what is it, and what does it look like?
It's
talk about
subject
it all
to
the time.
change.
No,
but
it's
if you-
definitely modified for the rescue animals. It's got like cat tunnels and chutes and ladders everywhere.
But like really
High-end.
beautifully designed,
Modern,
you know,
yeah.
like Architectural Digest version of like a cat paradise that we also could live in with art and things.
Atrium, some kind of
Yeah.
a glass atrium with. Because I love plants as well. So
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the Oklahoma weather, we could have some more of a tropical kind of thing in the center of the house. I'm thinking so. And I don't know. I know there's some issues, but it would be nice to have a really cool underground portion. Not just a basement, but some kind
For
of
shelter.
a cool, like, oh,
That
there's
too.
a tornado coming. Let's get under, but in style.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm
Emily,
going
you
to work on
second
that.
Yes. We're definitely on the same page. We talk about this all the time.
Brilliant. Well, I appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much for your time. This is just a teaser for people listening because I'm sure we're going to do this again at some point. You guys have so many great stories. Sounds like you're rooted in Oklahoma for a while at least. And great place to live and travel from. Great place to be creative. No traffic. Yes.
And the midpoint between LA and New York.
Everything, right?
We always
is
talk
awesome.
about that. It's so great.
Yeah. So 67 Bombs to Enid's coming out. Deadcenter Film Festival, which is coming up in June. Emily, do you have anything that you have coming up you're allowed to talk about? You're excited to, we can send people to your website or anything, or should we wait for now?
There's these couple of things that haven't been announced yet, but you could listen. We did a podcast called The Sunshine Place. We had 2 seasons out, which is really great about the cult Synanon and kind of the follow-up of the troubled teen industry. We won some awards for, so check that out. Also, it's still out, but one of my favorite things is called The Bond. You can find it on Max. It's a 4-part doc series about animals, and that was the real passion project for me. So check out The Bond, Senior, Downey Stream Cars.
I will link,
Downey's Dream Cars is really fun.
Also on Max.
I'll link the website and the links and everything so people can listen, so they can go straight to that right now and check it out. Kevin Ford, Emily Barclay, thanks so much for coming down to the Bedford studio. People listening, check out the links below, and thunder up. We'll see you next episode.
Thunder up.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.